We're talking today about Willie Nelson. And when I talked to Craig about it, he specifically wanted to talk about one album in particular.
The album is Stardust.
Yes.
I can't believe that you produce Starbucks. Sorry, the album is Stardust.
I have a lot of secrets. Some of them are in the retail sector and some of them are in the music sector. You've let another cat out of the bag. I'm the CEO of Starbucks.
Really? You're responsible for Starbucks and not Howard Schultz?
It's a different show that I do that.
Okay.
That I explain that I've secretly been.
I opened every cafe ever?
I've opened. It's not as good a title for sure.
It really isn't. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Step down.
But no, that is a big deal that you're also responsible for Starbucks. But I wanted to talk about the album Stardust.
Yes.
By Willie Nelson.
And I'm fascinated by this because I want to know why you chose this album over any album that you could choose.
Because there are infinite possibilities. I mean, Stardust, 1978. So this would have been 45 years ago. So if Willie's 90 now, this was halfway through his current life. So that feels it's not to imply that he's going to die any minute now, but it's not even the midway point of his life. But I just love this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. I remember being a kid and my dad would play it on cassette, I think, in a really shitty car cassette player. It wasn't an 8-track. I think it was your classic cassette, but I just associate it with being driven to school listening to Willie Nelson's Stardust.
That's amazing.
Also, my freshman year of college, I was playing Trivial Pursuit with all the guys in my dorm, and I was in the center, and then the final question was who wrote the song Stardust, and I knew immediately it was Hoagy Carmichael. I mean, as any cool 18-year-old would know, the work of Hoagy Carmichael, and everybody accused me of cheating at Trivial Pursuit and having read the cards of there was no way that I could have possibly known Hoagy Carmichael. But I think due to this album, I grew up with a steady diet of the American Songbook, and it was a very risky move on Willie's part because this is kind of the height of his outlaw country fame. He was coming off of Red-Headed Stranger, which is another favorite album of mine, and everybody at his record company told him not to record these standards, and it became, I think, his best-selling album of all time.
You're listening to part 1 of a conversation between Craig Cackowski, an honorary highwayman, and Tamara Federici, producer of Every Band Ever. Already in progress.
Yeah, and I can confirm that they really didn't want him to do that album. They didn't like that he wasn't going to put his face on the album was a problem. They were like, yeah, this is a recipe for disaster. They thought it wasn't going to hook anyone, especially young people. And he was not interested in really playing to young people. He said, great, this will be for older people or people my age. And the young people will think that I wrote this. So they'll just think it's new music. So he didn't feel like he was alienating anybody. He just really, I think, really wanted to interpret this because he grew up with this. And I mean, I think there's more to it than that, but that's the story I know.
So were you part of the conversation of what songs to record, or were these Willie's ideas?
These are, we pared down. I think we pared down together. Really, it was all his choice because he was so driven about, what kind of moved him. The thing that he kept gravitating towards was longevity and love stories that are big love stories, not like the outlaw stuff at all.
Tiny love stories.
Yeah, I think that was what it was. They're all so earnest. So I just kind of let him have his hand at that because he seemed to have something in mind about just being very straightforward about I don't know. It just feels like these feel like big themes. So it just kind of left alone at that.
But there must have been songs like standards that didn't make the cut, like things that you'd tried out that were left off the album. Do you remember any of those?
Yeah, Mr. Bojangles, that was not going to be right for him at all.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't really think of that as an American standard, I guess, but...
I feel sometimes I think things are standard that aren't standard at all.
Sure.
Fly Me to the Moon. I think he could have done a good version of that, but that didn't materialize.
It feels like that would tie in with the space themed cover.
Yeah,
you know?
Right? Fly Me to the Moon, and then there's a giant moon.
And you could maybe hide like a tiny image of Willie's face in the moon.
He tried to put a jazz spin on things, and then that got to be too much because this is so harmonica forward.
I've noticed it's a very harmonica forward album, yeah.
There were a lot of harmonicas used in this that I don't think people know about because they just think about harmonicas and hobos. Those kind of go together.
That's the association I have.
Is it?
I mean, I imagine it's a session musician playing harmonica, but in my mind, I'm always imagining a hobo with a bindle.
Yes.
And kind of 3-day stubble pulling out a harmonica. Though that can't possibly be that a hobo was just wandering around the studio and then surreptitiously started playing harmonica on the track. But that's the image that this album conjures, which I think is a positive image.
That is true. Perhaps in the really, really early days, that is what happened. But this was actually, so there were studio musicians, and then you actually had, much like flutes, you had your size of harmonica. And so we think of the one that is, very small and kind of sandwich sized, right? Compact. You can play it. It's got the hobo imagery. It's the tool of the it's the musical tool of the underdog. But this is, these were guys they were dressed up, like they were ready to go. So I think.
Okay, so each one specialized in a different harmonica.
Right. They sound like they're all the same, but you can kind of hear it whining on some, and some it sounds a little lower. That's an alto harmonica. And then there's the largest one actually like bends right around again. So it's actually that. It's actually sort of a J shape. It's pretty low. And sometimes it acts as a bass, a bass line, a bass guitar. And so that actually takes 2 to 3 people to hold up and then 2 people to play that. And they actually have to run a little bit. There's one who does the curve. There's one who does this one. And then they can actually do 2 different parts, 2 different stems of the whole thing. It's kind of, have you ever seen The Thousand Fingers of Dr. T?
I have not, but I know it's a Dr. Seuss movie, right?
Yes. And they're giant pianos, and some of them are curved. It looks a little bit like that. No keys, of course. And it sounds just, the sound is fuller. But yeah, I feel like the harmonica is the...
So you're saying there's multiple mouths on the same harmonica?
Yes, it wasn't a problem at that time.
A J-shaped harmonica with 2 heads.
2 to 3 people holding. So sometimes you can have one in the middle and on either side, or sometimes you just remove that. It depends on what you can afford.
I would imagine that would get dangerous of like, you might bonk heads with another harmonica player if you're going for the same note. I
think they worked it out. This is why they're the professionals. I think they've had time to I know that there was one high school jazz band that had this. So I would expect that those kids are coming out of that. Those kids become these professionals. This was recorded in the Hollywood Hills. So these are kind of LA musicians. I think they kind of just get trained into it. I'm not sure if it's a family business or what, but they know how to handle those situations of like fast runs.
That's interesting to think about because I associate Willie with Nashville for the country, industry, but I also associate him with Texas. But it was weird to think about him living in Los Angeles and recording in the Hollywood Hills.
I agree.
So what brought him to LA at this point in his life?
I think mostly weed. I think that was it. That was it. And we went to see him. I mean, his whole ethos was relax, man. Like that's it.
That was his catchphrase?
That was sort of the credo that we lived by. It wasn't dance like no one's looking. It was just relax, man. So I think that's how he ended up in LA. That's a very LA motto.
What percentage of time that you have been around Willie is he fully baked?
92%.
92?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, he's still going strong.
What's he like the 8% of time that he's not stoned?
Mean.
Like what sort of things does he say?
I'll feed you to my dog.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he looks...
That didn't sound like the Willie that I know at all.
I know. That's why it's better with the 92%.
I think this album really cemented Willie's reputation as just an interpreter because he is a great songwriter, but he also can cover any material and make it his own. To the point where I've heard it said that Willie could sing the phone book and make it interesting. Have you actually heard Willie singing the phone book?
I tried to get him to record A through H, and that took a while. but it was...
A through H of Los Angeles?
Yes. He was really good. Honestly, J made me cry and B made me laugh. And I'm not sure how that is, but I think that's just a testament as he really felt it on B and J.
Okay, but J is not included in A through H, by the way.
Don't tell Willie that. It's
you had him jump ahead to J.
Well, sometimes the studio is really, really wafty with smoke. So sometimes, you just lose a little bit. We did a covers album this year, and I don't remember anything about it. It's a country album, and I was secondhand high the whole time. So I think it went okay. I feel like it went fine. He knows what he's doing.
So it would sound a little bit like Jacksonville 773-528-6280.
I didn't even think of adding the numbers. You're really great at this. It was just the names.
Wait, you had him sing the phone book and omit the phone numbers?
No, it was really about the names, the people, instead of the names, numbers. He's not really a numbers guy. He's more of a names guy. What is your do you have a favorite track on this album?
Man, I love them all. I really love Blue Skies.
What's your favorite thing about it?
I think this, again, because this was an album for me as a kid, but I also was a big Muppets fan, and there was a Muppet Show sketch of prairie dogs singing Blue Skies.
I'm dying.
Do you remember this at all? This prairie dogs, and each of them pop out for like a little snippet of the song, and then they'll pop out at the same time for harmony. And I think as a kid, I conflated those because that was the only association I had with that song. Because I know the Willie Nelson version, I know the Prairie Dog version. Which came first? Because they would have been around the same time. Like 78 was like the heyday of Muppet Show. Was Willie influenced by the Muppets or vice versa?
That is an age-old question. I feel like you're hitting upon. That's like a chicken and egg situation. He loved the Muppets so much. I mean... There's so much you can... I feel a little bit of Gonzo in this album. A little bit of the wistfulness that Gonzo possesses, I feel like, is in this album.
Sure. I mean, like, the mood of I Hope I Go Back There Someday from the Muppet movie, of like, that feels like the same genre as every track on Stardust. And I think there's a little harmonica on that song, too.
Yeah. And especially, I was actually thinking about Kermit when a lot of these love songs have the same feel as Kermit at the beginning of Why Are There So Many Songs About Rainbows, right? That song is actually as earnest and as like facing as all of these songs are. Like one of the unnerving things about these songs are that he sounds vulnerable and that he's saying the plain truth in a lot of them. And that's Kermit to a T. He's earnest. He's sitting on that lily pad and we come in on that banjo. That's so Willie Nelson, You can see them hanging out easily on a lily pad or in the Hollywood Hills.
And they have a similar timbre to their voice, I would say also.
Yes, and they're both not hurried. The whole tempo of this album is Kermit style, Muppet movie, original. Can't speak to the other ones.
This album takes its time. Like, this is my ultimate, like, zone out and chill, mellow album when I want to just relax. Because, like, September Song, like, has got to be one of the slowest moving tracks you will ever hear, and I think it slows down as it goes. Also, what was behind that decision to make that track so slow?
I feel like we somehow knew that we needed to be a bridge to Phoebe Bridgers. We needed to make this pre-skeleton, and it was going to influence people in the future. It was hard to slow it down. I needed an actual metronome because it feels a little too slow in that way that Stanley Kubrick's 2001, how he slowed that down and it feels too slow. This is like that. That song is like that to me, where you're like, speed up, and then you're like, oh no, I have time to think in between these moments.
But it matches the lyrics, the days slow down, to a precious few. Like it's kind of like being at the end of your life, like looking back and appreciating the days and not wanting it to end. So I think that was a brilliant choice.
Thank you.
And also in 1978, to anticipate the existence of Phoebe Bridgers was just incredible forethought.
It just worked out. We had a feeling, and then we were like, let's act on that feeling. As you were talking, I also realized that the song that would have been perfect for him to do is Feelin' Groovy. It is amazing. Slow down, you're moving too fast. And groovy. Like all of those things. I mean, even though he was outlaw country, he'd be pretty comfortable in that. It's kind of amazing we didn't do that. It's the right slowness of that too.
He's the epitome of groovy.
Yeah, I think maybe we should go back and record this as a single Taylor Swift style and put it on the end of the album and then release it at like 4:25 a.m. and see how it does.
One thing I know about Willie is that he has a famous guitar, Trigger, to the point where Trigger has its own Wikipedia entry. There's also been documentaries made about Trigger. And I know he's had the same guitar since 1969, and that he says he'll retire when he can no longer play Trigger. And Trigger has like a huge hole in it as well, because he's worn it down from where he's been picking over the years. Do you have any good Trigger stories from this session?
Between you and I, Trigger has been playing in other bands.
Really?
Yeah.
Does Willie know that?
No. I am not going to be the one to... It's sort of like, how do you tell somebody that their guitar is cheating on them? You don't. You know, maybe that's his to find out. Maybe one of the other instruments will clue him in. I don't know if the other instruments have not seemed to work that way. But I'm going to keep a professional distance on that. And that's been really stressful, I feel like, for the harmonicans and for everyone. It's been a little unnerving, honestly.
Amazing. What can I say? I love me some cowboy content. Guest Craig Cackowski is an actor and improviser based in Los Angeles. People usually recognize him from Drunk History, Community, Veep, or dozens of projects he was not in. You can also hear him on Season 1 asking about Tom Waits and Liz Phair. Tamara Federici workshopped the word tenderoni for a year before bringing it to Michael Jackson. Every Band Ever is Will Velasquez as editor and producer, Clark Jackson as audio engineer, Will Brierley for publicity, Mary Lear as coordinator, Jonah Katz for special projects, artwork by Simon Morris Winheld. For more info, visit our link tree at Every Band Ever on Instagram. Get along, little doggies. This episode was recorded on June 1, 2023.